Hello YouTube, and welcome back to my playthrough of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. So we're going to continue from where we left off. So now, we're going to the next day of the trial for Professor Hairbrain. And hopefully now at trial, we're going to finally figure out what exactly happened with that machine, and what actually happened to Asman, who actually killed him. We got Drebber, we're going to bring him into court, and I'm really curious what he's going to have to testify about. So let's do it. Also, if you guys do enjoy this series, please do drop a like on it because it does help this series out a lot. 24th October, 9:11 a.m., the Old Bailey, defendant's antechamber. Good morning to you, Mr. Naruhodo. Good morning, Professor. Ready for today's proceedings? I hope so. I should be, even I with nothing left to... Good morning, my dear fellows. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, you're here. Why, naturally, a true gentleman stands shoulder to shoulder with his friends in battle, at all times. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'll see you later, then. Now, Professor, we really need you to remain calm in the courtroom today. Yes. Do try your hardest not to enter the witness stand uninvited again. Yes, please don't, because you've already made mistakes 2 times and almost got yourself declared guilty. Yes, I will. I realized it was a mistake, but, my dear fellows, I must interject. Oh, you're still here, Mr. Sholmes. What's the matter? Surely you've overlooked, some praise, have you not, to be cast in my direction, Sorry? I don't follow. Must I spell it out? I, the great Herlock Sholmes, the greatest detective of worldwide acclamation, arose at some ungodly hour to be here now. First thing in the morning, a miracle, you must agree. Well, if I must agree, then. As you know, my sleep is quite impregnable. Iris had to employ her full gamut of tactics. She pulled the covers off, shook me, poked both cheeks, punched me, and kicked me from the bed. Then she poured a boiling cup of her Lay's experimental blend on my face, and at last I was bestirred. Huh. Oh my, Iris has been busy. Iris doesn't have it in her to go that far. She's too nice. I sense the spirit of a fellow scientist, one who relishes the infinite possibilities of blending tea. I'm the one worthy of praise here, not Iris. This is my victory. Sorry to cut in. Who? Oh, Gregson. What does he want? Oh, Inspector Gregson. Good morning. Gregson, my dear fellow, why the grim expression at this delightfully early hour? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because I've been confronted with a grimmer expression, eh? Dear me, are you going to take that insult lying down, Professor? I'm assuming he has bad news. What? What? I don't know. Poor Professor. Also, when the dialogue is blue, that means that that's what Naruhodo is thinking. Here's the paperwork you asked for. What paperwork? Ah, I took the liberty of requesting it yesterday. I have a feeling it may prove useful. You wouldn't believe the hoops I had to jump through to get this brought out of the archives. It's a professor's autopsy report. Oh, so the, okay. So the man who died, the serial killer. The serial killer from several years ago. The one who killed all the nobles with the dog. Okay. And he got the mass murderer. Yep, this really creepy guy that we don't know what his face looks like. Which leads me to believe, you know, I have two possible theories. The serial killer could actually be alive, which I doubt. Or the second theory is that the serial killer could actually have been Barrick's brother. That's what I think. Now, they said that the serial killer killed Barrick's brother, but remember, the serial killer's identity was never leaked to the public, so they don't know who the serial killer is. So for all we know, the government could have just killed the serial killer and just said that that was that this was somebody else, and that Barrick's brother was a victim, when Barrick's brother could have been the serial killer. I don't know. We'll have to see. It's also a possibility that Asman was the serial killer, but I don't know about that. You know, I don't know, but I think that definitely one of those theories, I think, is definitely correct. And as for the guy's mask, let's see here, yeah. So this is the serial killer's face. This is what the serial killer looked like. And so people are like, what? This is the serial killer's face? I don't know if he wore this helmet while he killed people, but I do know that the government didn't want his identity revealed. So for some reason, the government didn't want people to know who he was, which leads me to believe that he was somebody important if they didn't want the government to know who the serial killer was. And they put this mask on him, even when he had a wax display in the museum. They buried him like this, so he was buried like this, so that nobody would know who it was. Who killed 5 members of the aristocracy? He was found guilty in a close trial 10 years ago now. It was all done under wraps. And the thing is, though, remember that Drebber claimed that Drebber was there at the cemetery for some reason. And he claims that the professor rose from his grave. But there's something off here. And he was quickly executed soon after the trial. It's all in here. The autopsy reported the mass murderer known as the Professor, who was tried and found guilty by a closed trial 10 years ago. I don't know what to say. Thank you, Inspector. You know, this is the second serial killer that you encounter in an Ace Attorney game. In the first Ace Attorney game, there was also a serial killer. The serial killer was in Case 5. In Case 5 of the first game. That was, I think it was was it the DL6 incident? I'm trying to remember which it was. But there was also a serial killer in one of the cases. And the serial killer was actually deceased the same way. Well, not died the same way, but also dead. And somebody else was actually charged with a crime. But I feel like this case has this serial killer that killed people like 10 years ago. This has something to do with this case. It's definitely connected right now. But what could it have to do with this machine blowing up all of a sudden now? Why did Drebber want the head of the serial killer from the Wax Museum? Yes, much obliged, Gregson. Us lowly lot at the yard are just doing what we can. The shadow of the great detective Sholmes, of course. Well then, Professor Harebrain, this is it. Today we're going to lay all this to rest at last. I want to look at this autopsy report. Condemned prisoner. Redacted for confidentiality. Pseudonym the Professor. So we don't know what his name was. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, 17th of June. Courtney Stevens. That's it. That is the full autopsy report. Death by hanging. Redacted for confidentiality. Why does the government not want people to know who the serial killer was? Well then, Professor Harebrain, this is it. Today we're going to lay all this to rest. I wish you the best of luck, Professor. I suppose. He'll be in there today, will he? Drebber. Yes, we expect the prosecution to summon him as a witness. Somehow I feel like putting him on the witness stand is gonna go bad. I'm still amazed that you managed to find him in just one day. I really owe you both so much. Counsel and the defendant. The trial is about to resume. Kindly make your way into the courtroom at once. This is it then. The final chapter. Funny, my heart's racing a little. I've not felt this before actually, this strange foreboding. As if something's going to happen in this trial that I'm not ready for. But I can't let that distract me from the only thing that really matters. Finding the truth. Something is gonna go bad. I feel it in my gut too. Remember how the McGillid case ended? So I feel something is gonna go bad. And you know what really creeps me out is what if the serial killer is still alive? That's what's creeping me out right now. So Drebber claims he saw the serial killer run from the grave. That he got up from the grave and left. But then the police checked the grave and they said that the body was there. But the police didn't know what remember the police didn't know what the serial killer looked like because his identity was confidential. So another body could have been put in the grave. That's what I was starting to think too. 24th October, 9:30 a.m. the Old Bailey courtroom. Okay, let's do this. Oh, and look, the Barrack has his assistant with him. In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session again. And we're starting to think that that's Chasm, We resume the public hearing of Albert Harebrain here present, who stands accused of murder. Somehow I feel that this is going to be the best trial so far. Are the counsels for the prosecution and defense ready to proceed? The prosecution is ready, my lord. The defense is ready, my lord. As promised, Lord Van Zeeks has his apprentice with him. His apprentice with memory loss. If I may, Lord Van Zeeks. Yes, my lord. There appears to be someone standing at your side. Yes, my apprentice and assistant. The prosecution believes today's proceedings will see the complexity of this case rise considerably. So he knows how to use a sword. I therefore instructed my assistant to attend to ensure the smooth, running of the trial. And the smooth running of liquor refreshments, by the look of it. The way he holds himself, the way he moves, it couldn't be anyone else. But he's still suffering from amnesia, so there's really nothing we can do at the moment. I know, but, oh, this is so very hard. It would appear the prosecution has done a fine job in responding to the demands the court made yesterday. I understand you have successfully secured the engineer who disappeared from the scene on the day in question. Yes, my lord. I intend to call him as a witness shortly. I got a bad feeling about this. Very good, very good. Now then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who have been chosen at random to represent the will of the people in this courtroom today. Are you ready and willing to proceed? Of course, my lord. I'm sure we all understand the importance of doing our civic duty. I do so despise deception in the sea. I find it so very wearing. To take a man's life with a conjuring trick, it is against the magician's code, not to mention the law. Any fake scientist should feel the wrath of God, if you ask me. We have to listen to what's said on both sides of the fence, and then settle on one. That's it, isn't it? Wasn't like this in my day. Wasn't like this at all. If all parties are ready to proceed, you may begin, Lord Van Zeeks. Before I do, my lord, there is a report I must read to the court. What report? Yesterday, at the Great Exhibition of Grounds, the evidence of primary importance in this case. The super high voltage instantaneous kinesis machine, which was installed in the experimentation stage, was deliberately destroyed in an explosion, affected by an unknown person or persons. It wasn't an unknown person or persons, it was Drebber. He admitted to it even on the scene. He literally said, "You didn't stop this bomb," and the thing blew up. So we have witness tests, we have witnesses. We have Ryunosuke, we have Susato, we have Mr. Shomes, and we have Gregson. We have 4 people who witnessed Drebber admitting to blowing up the stage. So there's no way that they can say that this is an unknown person. We know Drebber blew it up. We have literally 4 people that caught him admitting to it. It was, what? An explosion? Yeah, you probably shouldn't be holding that gun in court. This is an outrage. Yes, I heard this grave news yesterday. Scotland Yard submitted a report to my office in the evening. I read that the machine was blasted to smithers and the wreckage reduced to ashes in the flames. Were all the cops okay that were near it? I have here a photograph print of the scene, taken in the wake of the explosion. It shows what little remains of the machine. And there's a hole there, so that it opens up like a hatch. There's a reason for that. Yes, a terrible business. He did it to destroy the evidence, did he? That Enoch Drebber. The court will take this print as evidence, counsel. Post-explosion photograph. Photographic print at the experimentation stage after it was completely leveled by a time bomb. Metal floor of the stage has been blown open by the explosion. Late yesterday afternoon, the protection afforded to the machine by the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act was revoked. However, before a thorough investigation could begin, the invention was obliterated from existence. As such, this will become a very different trial. I don't know if that's supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing, the way he said it. As it stands now, with no evidence on which to draw meaningful conclusions, the authenticity of the kinesis machine will remain forever in obscurity. Indeed. A most unfortunate state of affairs. However, one thing remains clear. The victim's death was the result of the actions of the accused. Of that, we can be certain. For it was the accused himself who was operating the machine, and who ultimately caused this loss of control. Oh, come on, Zeeks. As Lord Van Zeeks rightly says, this is a very different trial now. The accused accepts responsibility for his part in the events that transpired. He acknowledges that Mr. Asman died as a result of the accident caused by his machine's malfunction. However, unbeknownst to the professor, he was being deliberately deceived by a pair of very clever fraudsters. Names, counsel, if you please, Asman and Drebber. The engineer, Mr. Enoch Drebber, and the victim himself, Mr. Odie Asman. So what exactly were these two men up to behind the defendant's back? The defense intends to expose that information, thus establishing the unequivocal innocence of the defendant. Thank you, counsels. The positions of the prosecution and defense have been clearly stated. Lord Van Zeeks, summon your first witness, please. At once, my lord. The prosecution calls the engineer, Mr. Enoch Drebber, to the stand. Oh man, I got a bad feeling about this. State your name and occupation for the court. Name, Enoch Drebber. Occupation. Hard to pin down, I would say. See that black monocle? Yes, why do I feel as though I've seen it somewhere before? Oh, you too. I had exactly the same feeling myself. Your file indicates that you are currently being investigated in connection with another case. The theft of a waxwork model, is it? A most extraordinary sounding business. But that has no bearing on this trial, I assure you. Cleave it from your mind. No, it has something to do with this. You're familiar with the public experiment carried out at the Great Exhibition some days ago. The accused super high voltage instantaneous kinesis demonstration. Yes, you could say that, I am aware of it. There was a terrible accident, wasn't there? It was you, Mr. Drebber, who constructed the vast machine used in the experiment. Or so our investigation indicates. Can you confirm your involvement? Yes, I constructed it, in precise accordance with the blueprints, but that's all. No. Then the court would be very interested to hear your thoughts about the machine, I'm sure. An amazing device, if you ask me. The pinnacle of modern science, making instantaneous kinesis a reality at last. No. What? Good gracious. Do you mean to say that the experiment was bona fide? Is that your belief, sir? No, it's not. Yes, that is very much my belief. Such a waste that it blew up. You blew it up. You literally admitted to it.
Objection!
But we've already established the machine was nothing more than a prop for an elaborate conjuring trick.
Objection!
You've established nothing of the sort. All that was shown during yesterday's proceedings is that the same outcome could have been produced by means of stage trickery. The defense merely proposed a method and demonstrated its feasibility, nothing more. Well, he actually does have a little bit of a point there. We proved that there could have been a trick involved, but we didn't prove that the machine was fake. But we've procrastinated long enough, I feel. Witness, you will now give your formal testimony about the machine that you constructed for the purpose of the demonstration at the Great Exhibition. Understood. Oh, this is going to be good. I want to hear this. Let's see how much he lies through his teeth. I met the young professor approximately 1 year ago through Mr. Asman's introduction. Okay, that's not a lie. He provided me with the blueprints and I constructed the machine to his precise specifications. It was no trick. Nope. Lie right there. If the whole show was a fraud, it would have required a body double. Tell me, did the victim have a twin? I think the waxwork was that. All the spectators saw the birdcage appear above their heads and then crash headfirst into the crystal tower. A terrible accident, I grant you. Perhaps the scientist on which the machine was built was flawed somehow. A body double. That goes without saying, surely. You know, the thing is, though, this guy thinks that he's smart, but I think he just gave us the answer. He literally, I think, just gave us the answer. How could it have been done without a body double? That's how he literally gave us the answer right there. To give the impression that something has moved, when in reality it hasn't. It's a basic conjuring principle. The deception cannot be achieved without substituting the original with a fake at some point in the performance. But would I be right in saying you haven't managed to establish anything along those lines? Ugh. Incidentally, the prosecution has already confirmed that Mr. Asman had no twin siblings. It's my understanding that this witness is well versed in conjuring artfulness. But such talents do not indicate that he was actually able to accomplish what he claims. Namely, the construction of what by all accounts must have been an extremely complex scientific machine. Whatever do you mean? Yesterday's proceedings brought the true nature of your past exploits to light, Mr. Drebber. Indeed it did, my lord. As a swindler who preys on innocent scientists to elicit government grant money through conjuring know-how. Yes, it's true that I possess considerable knowledge of stage magic. But crucially, my scientific knowledge more than matches that of any academic in the field. Investigation of the witness's workshop attests to that claim, my lord. As evidence, the police found this Royal Society trophy for young talent in science there. Yes, that's true. We spotted it there ourselves. If a hypothesis is sound, it can always be forged into a physical manifestation with sufficient skill. Though I may have sold the secrets of some deceptive wiles to sniveling, talentless scientists in the past. Would you therefore assert that the explosion machine was an unfortunate accident, or, of course, deliberate act of murder carried out by a misuse of the science? Counsel for the defense. Your cross-examination, please. Yes, my lord. The Kinesis machine. I met the young professor approximately 1 year ago for Mr. Asman's introduction. Hold it! So you were already acquainted with Mr. Asman himself? Not really. By chance, I'd seen his name mentioned in the papers, that's all. But I had no interest in his private affairs. If he was an unscrupulous investor, it was no concern of mine. As long as people pay their bills, I take up my tools and construct what they ask for. So why did Mr. Asman approach you in particular, then? Who can say? I presume because my name is associated with excellence in engineering. Not to mention, excellence in fraud. Hard to gauge. But the point is, all I did was construct the machine according to the blueprints I was given. In other words, the Kinesis machine was built on solid scientific principles. Yes, you might say that. Professor Harebrain certainly has a mind like no other. He provided me with the blueprints and I constructed the machine to its precise specifications. It was no trick. Hold it! It's clear that you have both scientific knowledge and knowledge of conjuring magic, however. The more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to handle whatever comes along. But your implication is that I furnished the machine with some trickery, I think. It's a possibility that we have to explore. Unfortunately, though, the machine has been blown to Kingdom Come. So there's really nothing left to explore, is there? It appears that the Kinesis machine was fitted with a timed explosive device of some kind. And there's nothing left of that device either. Not a single shred of evidence remaining, I hear. He must have planned all this from the outset. But in any case, it's abundantly clear that the experiment couldn't have been a trick. If the whole show was a fraud, it would have required a body double. Tell me, did the victim have a twin? Hold it! Of course, that's it. Mr. Asman was a twin. No, you shouldn't be saying that, Ryu. Perhaps my learned friend wasn't listening earlier. Mr. Asman has no twin siblings. No, I heard you before, but the thread of hope hadn't quite left me. The demonstration could have been a trick if there was somebody who looked sufficiently like the victim. But Dr. Siff absolutely ruled that out as a possibility. It is beyond question that the victim himself, Mr. Asman, did move from the stage to the Crystal Tower. The fingerprints found at the scene attest to the fact. So it can't have been orchestrated using someone who looked identical to Mr. Asman then. It's a waxwork figure, because if it's a complete waxwork figure, would they also have the grooves in your fingerprints, I wonder? Because that's what people have, everyone has a distinct, a different fingerprint. So I wonder. What are you thinking, Mr. Naruhodo? Oh no, nothing. Just that the idea of someone who looked identical to the victim is playing on my mind. All the spectators saw the birdcage appear above their heads and then crash headfirst into the Crystal Tower.
Hold it!
It crashed headfirst, you say? According to the many witness reports from those there at the time, yes. Were you not there at the exhibition grounds on the day? Unlikely. I rarely leave my workshop. No, you were there. Professor Hairbrain said he saw you with a crossbow. Yes, another of your unique inventions was found at the scene. Well, it was the unveiling of a machine I'd labored over for many months. I saw it clearly with my own eyes, the birdcage plummeting headfirst into the tower. What a surprise. So now he's claiming he was there. I believe the victim's neck was broken from the headlong fall, wasn't it? How would you have come by that information? Exactly. Even an infernal recluse like me reads the newspapers, you know. According to the reports, 2 injuries were apparent on the victim's body. Yes, he'd been stabbed in the chest by a screwdriver believed to belong to the defendant, and he had broken vertebrae as a result of a fall from a considerable height. Correct. My learned friend has been doing his research, it seems. Do we know which injury was the fatal one? Sadly not. Forensic science is not yet at a level where such things can be determined. So we don't know what was the thing that killed him. Was it the screwdriver stab, or was it the broken neck? But here's the thing. In real life cases, what will happen is the police will leave out like certain details that the media won't know. So, for instance, the media might be told that a victim was shot and killed, but they might not be told where that person was shot. They might not be told like the distance. They might not be told what type of gun it was either. So there's specifics, specific things that only the killer would know, or a good witness. And so when you bring in witnesses and you bring in people that say that they know what happened, if they start saying, oh, it was this gun when it wasn't, or he was over there when he wasn't, or he was shot in this place when he wasn't, you know that person's not telling the truth. But then when you have another witness or somebody who says something like that matches it exactly, information that wasn't released to the public, you know you're on the right track at that point. So that's why the police purposely sometimes withhold specific information, small little details like that, but enough details that the killer will remember them. What we do know is that the victim died having sustained both injuries at some point during the experiment. And since he was found in the birdcage with his neck broken, it's obvious that he fell from a considerable height. I suppose that's hard to deny. A terrible accident, I grant you. Perhaps the science on which the machine was built was flawed somehow.
Hold it!
So you understood the science, did you? Not in the slightest. Oh, right. As I've said a number of times, I'm an engineer. My job is to manufacture according to the blueprints I'm given. I would be inviting manifold problems if I foolishly allowed my brain to digest the ideas behind them. I could be accused of stealing those ideas, for example. But how is it possible to construct a machine without really understanding the principles it relies on? That's a good point. Well, You're practicing law without really understanding the principles it relies on, aren't you? What a scumbag. A very good point. Stand up for yourself, Mr. Naruhodo. The point is, the experiment resulted in instantaneous kinesis taking place. As such, the science must be sound. Yes, and really, experimental results are all that matters when it comes to proving a hypothesis. He's certainly very sure of himself. What do you think, Mr. Naruhodo? Well, after the machine has been completely destroyed by yesterday's explosion, there's another thing that came to my mind. The bomb was inside the machine, and Drebber was the one who constructed it. So therefore, Drebber's the only one who could have put the bomb in the machine. They could use that against him, but I don't know if they're gonna bring that up. It's going to be impossible to argue its authenticity one way or the other. But if we're unable to establish that it was a piece of stage trickery, rather than genuine science, we will have no grounds on which to demonstrate Professor Harebrain's innocence. Both Mr. Asma and this man and tricked the professor and used him. They took advantage of his naivety and his unbending belief in his work, and I won't let them get away with it. And seeing as the professor is an old friend of Lord Van Zeek's, what on earth must he be feeling towards Drebber? Okay, we're gonna have to try to call out some lie. Could Asman be the professor? The serial killer, not the Professor Harebrain. What do we got here? This lock does look very strong, doesn't it? There's definitely no way you could remove the mask yourself if it was put on you. What a terrible way to treat someone, even a convicted criminal. I know, it's starting to make me livid actually. Mr. Naruhodo, please. I mean, just think about it. Imagine if you had an itch on your cheek all of a sudden. You'd be utterly helpless. Well, yes, that's true. But I'm not sure that warrants quite so much anger. Oh, right. Sorry. I wonder if we can bring this up here. Let's see.
Objection!
No. I already made a mistake. Okay, let me just skip through this, because this is,
Hold it!
Let me see what Naruhodo said here again.
Objection!
Okay, just skip through this. We've seen this before. Notice how he returned the waxwork body. I just realized that, but he didn't return the head because he probably doesn't want the identity to be known. So it can't have been orchestrated using someone who looked identical to Mr. Asman then. What are you thinking, Mr. Naruhodo? Oh no, nothing. Just that the idea of someone who looked identical to the victim is playing on my mind. Someone who looked identical. Is there any more information we can get from this head? It's just so creepy that this is the serial killer's head. When the lens is extended, dark staining is visible on the bellows. I think it might be this. A terrible accident, I grant you. Perhaps the science on which the machine was built was flawed somehow. Let me press him again on this. So you understand the science, did you? Not in the slightest. Oh, right. As I've said a number of times, I'm an engineer. My job is to manufacture according to the blueprints I'm given. I will be inviting manifold problems if I foolishly allow my brain to digest the ideas behind them. I could be accused of stealing those ideas, for example. But how is it possible to construct a machine without really understanding the principles it relies on? Well, you're practicing law without really understanding the principles it relies on, aren't you, scumbag? A very good point. Stand up for yourself, Mr. Naruhodo. The point is, the experiment resulted in instantaneous kinesis taking place. As such, the science must be sound. Yes, and really, experimental results are all that matters when it comes to proving a hypothesis. He's certainly very sure of himself. What do you think, Mr. Naruhodo? Well, now that the machine has been completely destroyed by yesterday's explosion, it's going to be impossible to argue its authenticity one way or the other. But if we're unable to establish that it was a piece of stage trickery rather than genuine science, we will have no grounds on which to demonstrate Professor Harebrain's innocence. Both Mr. Asman and this man in the stand tricked the professor and used him. They took advantage of his naivety and his unbending belief in his work, and I won't let them get away with it. The professor is a victim. These two guys are one guy is dead and this guy are absolute scumbags. And seeing as the professor is an old friend of Lord Van Zeek's, what on earth must he be feeling towards Drebber? Okay, so I'm gonna try this. Probably might get this wrong, but it's worth a shot. Okay, he says he doesn't understand the science, but then he has a science trophy, Royal Society Trophy for Excellence in Science that was found in Mr. Drebber's workshop. It's a very prestigious award for a young scientist, so he has to understand a little bit of it at least. Let's try this.
Objection!
The defense would have to object to that last statement, my lord. And I would have to overrule your objection, counsel. But, I mean, come on, he says he doesn't understand the science, but then he has an award for the Royal Academy of Science. I'm glad to hear it. And you would also have to think again.
Hold it!
It's clear that you have both scientific knowledge and knowledge of conjuring magic. However, the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to handle what comes along. But your implication is that I furnished the machine with some trickery, I think. It's a possibility that we have to explore. Unfortunately, though, the machine has been blown to Kingdom Come. So there's really nothing left to explore, is there? Yes, there was a timed explosive on the device, but all the spectators saw the birdcage appear above their heads and then crash headfirst into the crystal tower. Wait. Birdcage. Ah, look here, Miss Susato. Oh yes, the wood's cracked and broken a little. I suppose because it fell from such a height. Yes, from the height at which the balloon was flying down to the crystal tower below. A fall of about 30 feet, or 9 meters, leaving the man inside tragically dead. But this is the bottom of the cage. Isn't this the head? Wouldn't this be the head right up here? Head first. Okay, let's try, hopefully.
Objection!
Oh! We've examined the birdcage that crashed in the crystal tower ourselves. Okay. So this is getting really hard now. As you can see, the cage, which is wooden construction, has sustained damage in one particular spot. Following the explosion, it fell some 30 feet into the glass of the crystal tower. That level of damage is to be expected, surely. I agree. The damage itself is entirely understandable. What doesn't make sense is the location of that damage. No, we got him now. All the breakages in the wood are the base of the birdcage, not the top. What are you saying? Oh, look, he's getting nervous now. That's the opposite of where they should be. That's right, my lord. The birdcage that was at the scene is damaged at its base. So we have reports of the birdcage falling headlong into the crystal tower, yet the damage is at the bottom. The only way to reconcile these two facts is to accept that there were two bird cages in play that day, which were at some point switched. Switched during what wasn't a scientific experiment at all, but an elaborate piece of stage trickery. Oh. Ah. Good gracious. Explain yourself, witness. Well, I like the judge is telling him that now. Well... If we examine the facts, there's only one logical conclusion we can draw. The damage on the base of the birdcage clearly indicates that it crashed tail first into the tower.
Objection.
But multiple witnesses report claim it fell head first. The birdcage materialized in the sky next to a balloon flying over the stage, following a spontaneous explosion. At an altitude of some 60 feet above ground level, which is approximately 18 meters. If it then proceeded to fall some 30 feet into the crystal tower in the ensuing deflagration. Witness reports amidst such chaos are notoriously unreliable.
Objection.
No, but the victim's neck was broken.
Objection.
He plummeted 30 feet inside a heavy wooden cage. However he fell, it would be unsurprising to find one or two of his vertebrae crushed. What's this guy planning to say here? But what I'll say here is, Lord Van Zieks is kind of right, and he's also kind of wrong. Now, what he's kind of right on is that when there's witnesses to something that happened, like something terrible happens, witnesses oftentimes will think they saw something when they didn't. They will maybe not intentionally, like their statements will be misleading, but not intentionally. Like they might think that a killer ran in a specific direction when the killer ran in a different direction. They might think that they've heard a specific number of shots when they heard much less shots than they actually thought they heard. Specific things like that. So it's entirely possible that the witnesses were wrong on the way that the cage landed. However, though, the fact that you had hundreds of witnesses, not just a few, you had hundreds of witnesses, and pretty much every single witness is saying the same thing, that the cage fell headfirst into the tower, that's the point where the witnesses are right. A riveting scientific analysis of events from the prosecution there. Though to be even more rigorous, you would have to say it was only one vertebra, actually. What? What is he talking about? He wasn't quiet for long. I do like Drebber's theme, though, that plays for him. I find it hard to see what's motivating Lord Van Zieks. This witness is clearly a swindler, and one who deceived a personal friend of his. If you're going to establish this deception, do it right. Sorry? I feel like that's the undertone here. Ah, yes, and there's one more point. The defense appears to have forgotten. It obviously wasn't a trick, as a certain truth very plainly demonstrates. What? What truth? It seems to me that the cross-examination had better continue until we resolve this matter. Mr. Drebber, you will amend your testimony with details of this truth. Of course, we must treat the matter scientifically after all. You're not treating it very scientifically. I nearly had him there. And he moves around like a robot. The kinesis clearly took place because there's nowhere else 30 feet high for the birdcage to have fallen from. No, the balloon.
Hold it!
What do you mean? Well, before the demonstration began, the victim was alive on stage in front of the audience. Yes, there are lots of witnesses who saw Mr. Asman on the experimentation stage, that's true. And the victim's neck broke as a result of an impact following a fall. Logically, therefore, the victim must have fallen from somewhere. The balloon that exploded was at an altitude of 60 feet. The point of impact on the tower was 30 feet up. That difference of 30 feet is therefore the total distance the birdcage fell. And there's no other location from which the cage could have fallen that distance if it didn't drop out of the sky. Ergo, the victim himself must have been beamed from the stage into the sky above the crystal tower. A trenchant scientific analysis. Dear me, every time I hear it explained, it sounds increasingly plausible. Oh yes, it's all very well thought out. Certainly all the spectators on the day saw it. The birdcage plummeting 30 feet through the air, I mean. Irritatingly, yes. Terrible accident, I grant you. Okay, wait, the balloon. This here. And this is Drebber here firing a crossbow bolt at the balloon. This.
Objection!
A what? It's wrong? Okay, wait, I got that wrong. Man, I made already 3 mistakes already. I'm gonna save here just in case.
Objection!
So it was the sketch that I had to show. This is a diagram of the experimentation stage and its surroundings. We know that somehow the birdcage appeared in mid-air before falling down into the crystal tower. A fall of about 30 feet, or 9 meters. However, if you examine the diagram carefully, sorry guys, you'll see that there is one other possible location from which the birdcage could have fallen. The same distance of 30 feet. No. Well, it appears the defense has a possible explanation to put forward. Go ahead, counsel. Yes, my lord. Of course. You will indicate the place to which you are referring, on the same diagram. The alternative location from which the birdcage could have fallen, the requisite 30 feet. I wonder. Could it be this? Because I remember that we saw this as like kind of like a hatch that could open up. Could he have fallen down there? But if he fell down there, how does that explain how he got over here? I'm still confused by that. How would he have gotten him over? I mean, it's worth a shot. We do have a save. Let's try it.
Take that!
Oh, so that's why my photo of the balloon didn't work. The place I'm referring to is here. But that's where the birdcage would have been to begin with. Which is exactly the point, my lord. Yes, the birdcage was in the machine on the stage. But what we must also consider is the height of the stage itself. Go on, counsel. It turns out that the experimentation stage was built at a considerable height above ground level. If you look at the diagram, in fact, you'll see it's about the same height above the ground as the balloon was above the crash site. When the experiment got underway, the machine and the birdcage were engulfed in steam. That opened up and he fell. At that moment, the floor of the stage gave way, and if we assume there to be a void underneath, this birdcage and the one seen by the audience would have fallen almost exactly the same distance. Look at how nervous Drebber is. I think we're onto something now. Once again, my lord, this all points to the fact that there was not one birdcage, but two.
Objection!
Okay, we got it now. My learned friend has no evidence that the stage had such a contrivance in its design. Someone is responsible for the criminal destruction of the Kinesis machine itself, it's true. However, the stage still stands. And take a moment to look at the photographic print of the scene following yesterday's explosion. Good lord, the metal grill that formed the floor of the machine is undone. Yes, most likely blown open by the force of the explosion that destroyed the rest of the machine. The defense calls for the space below the stage to be investigated immediately. Mr. Drebber, it was you who built the Kinesis machine, which means that it was you who built the 2 bird cages that were used to carry out this deception. Okay, he's nervous now. Whether Professor Hairbrain's hypothesis is sound or not makes no difference, because it's the construction of this machine that matters, a machine designed to take Mr. Asman's life. And lay the blame firmly at the professor's door, something that could only have been carried out by you, Mr. Enoch Drebber.
Objection!
What's Van Zeek's thinking? If my learned friend has reached the end of his wild assertions, the prosecution would like to crush the defense's argument slowly, but surely. How? I want to hear this. What? Your argument fails to hold water. On 2 counts. 2. Firstly, before and after the experiment, this witness went nowhere near the Kinesis machine. Every relevant member of the staff from the exhibition has attested to that. And I believe members of the Scotland Yard have also been on watch duty at every public experiment. In other words, Mr. Drebber had no opportunity to switch the alleged pair of bird cages.
Objection!
But I've already explained why he wouldn't have needed to. The nonsense with the crossbow, that doesn't bolster your case at all. The man who disappeared from the stage and the man who crashed into the tower are one and the same. The forensic investigation team's report is unequivocal on the point. And the second flaw in your assertion is a distinct lack of motive. Why would this man have wanted to take the victim's life? He had no reason to do so. No, he does, because he would take the research grant money. He would cut Asman out. A motive? Do I have to think of everything myself? I have here a contract provided by the witness. What contract is this, Lord Van Zeeks? This contract into which Mr. Drebber entered with the victim, Mr. Asman. It reads, Mr. Drebber is to receive 30% of all remunerations from government grants or other income. 30%. Certainly very favorable contractual conditions. But there was one very important provision bolted into that clause. What provision? Mr. Drebber may only uphold this right on condition that both contracting parties are alive. Oh, in other words, if either of us were to die, the contract will become null and void. So you see, I had nothing to gain from Mr. Asman's death. The diametric opposite, in fact. Oh, this isn't good. This is not good right now. Need I say more? The witness had neither an opportunity nor a reason to commit the alleged crime. In short, the possibility of Mr. Drebber having done as you suggest is nil. Oh no, this is not good. It seems the defense assertion was somewhat wide of the mark. Lord Van Zeeks, you will submit the contract as evidence, please. The contract between Mr. Asman and Mr. Drebber detailing the terms which they would profit from the Kinesis experiment. It's true. If Drebber had no opportunity to switch the birdcage under the stage with the one in the Crystal Tower, let's look at this contract. The investor, Mr. Odie Asman, hereby enters into contract with the provider, Mr. Enoch Drebber, to fund labor and materials for the construction of a super high voltage instantaneous kinesis machine. Mr. Drebber is to receive 30% of all remuneration from government grants or other income. Mr. Drebber may only uphold this right on condition that both contracting parties are alive. Doesn't help us at all. He couldn't have done it. And in any case, I have no idea what his motive might have been. There is one aspect of your argument that still holds true, however. What's that, Susato? There were 2 bird cages. The prosecution is unable to deny that. Ah. So I'm sure you're on the right lines, Mr. Naruhodo, and I've no doubt there are other aspects of your assertion that are undeniable truths too. Well, it would seem that the defense has no rejoinder to offer. Well, I must say I'm a little surprised. I came here to testify about the machine I built, and instead my reputation is defiled. You defiled your own reputation, idiot. But the prosecution's counter has set the record straight, I think. It's impossible that I'm the culprit.
Objection!
At the beginning of this trial, we believed that there was only 1 birdcage. Yet now we know there must have been 2. In other words, there was more to the demonstration than we realized at first. I think it's abundantly clear that the same applies to the culprit. Get to the point. There's more to him that he's not saying, because they had a plan to do a scam here. The stage demonstration was constructed and set up in its entirely by you, Mr. Drebber. Therefore, it's inconceivable that you had no hand in the events that transpired. Oh, look at how mad he's getting now. So if circumstances mean it's impossible that you could have carried out the crime yourself, it points to the fact that someone else was involved. Someone else? Counsel, are you suggesting? Yes, my lord. Mr. Drebber had an accomplice.
Objection!
An accomplice now? Well then I presume you're prepared for what's to come. He's gonna ask us to name that accomplice, probably. Now that you're accusing not only this witness, but someone else of the most serious of crimes. If these accusations turn out to be false, then make no mistake. The prosecution will demand an equally serious punishment for your slander. Well, counsel, do you intend to pursue this course and formally accuse another party of involvement in this matter? What do I do here? At the moment, this is a little more than a hunch on my part. I don't know for sure if Drebber had an accomplice, or even if he really is the culprit here. Judging by his facial expressions, I'm gonna assume there is a culprit. An accomplice. One way or another, I have to make my position clear as a lawyer. So what's my stance going to be? Did Drebber have an accomplice, or not? Name the accomplice. If we back down, there's nothing else, and Hairbrain is gonna be found guilty. We have to name the accomplice. The defense is ready to name Mr. Drebber's accomplice. Somehow, the 2 birdcages must have been switched. Everything points to that. Yet, according to the coroner's report, that's not a possibility. But that inconsistency itself is a clue. No. No. Oh man, I think I know who the accomplice is. No. It can't be. Counsel. My lord. Guys, if my hunch is right on this is gonna flip this whole case on who the accomplice is. You have received a stark warning already if you are nevertheless determined. Oh man. Then I must now ask you to identify this alleged accomplice by name. People are probably wondering, what are you thinking? Who is this accomplice? I think that I'm onto something. The accomplice. Courtney Siff. Everyone's gonna say, what? Why her? The coroner. Because her statements make no sense on the 2 bird cages. She could have easily faked it. She's the coroner. She's the police doctor in charge of determining the cause of death. Let's see if I'm onto something right now. Can I look at my evidence? No, I can't. I doubt the masked man would have anything to do with it. No, 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 no. It's Courtney. That's what I feel. Let's see if I'm right on this. I'm taking a big risk here. This is gonna flip this whole case, if I'm right.
Take that!
The name of the person in question is... What's wrong, my Nipponese friend? Surely fear doesn't bind your tongue now. It's a little late for that. Of course I'm afraid. After all, naming her in this capacity is definitely going to make waves. A lot of waves. I'm right! I could very well turn every single person in this courtroom against me. I'm sure it will be alright, Mr. Naruhodo. Thank you, Miss Susato. The enemy always appears larger than life, but you'll appear exactly the same to the enemy. Alright then, here goes. You've kept us waiting long enough. Your answer, counsel, now. The person who colluded with Mr. Drebber in order to carry out this wicked crime. Remember, I just remembered something. The coroner arrived at, she also arrived at Drebber's apartment, remember that, at his workshop, and she kicked us out really quickly. She didn't want us being there. Is Scotland Yard's coroner. Dr. Courtney Siff. What the blazes are you talking about? Dr. Siff? The head of the forensic investigation team and the coroner who conducted the autopsy on the victim, yes, her. Everyone's gonna go against me now, but I believe it's right. We know there were 2 bird cages, so who could have carried out the switch to complete the illusion? The accident happened in front of a huge crowd of spectators, and the area was immediately sealed off. Then everyone, police officers included, were banished to make way for the forensic investigation team. When else could the switch have occurred? It can only have been in that team's presence. Look, Drebber's face says it all. We're on the right track. It's essential the court determines exactly what happened following the incident. The defense demands Dr. Siff to be summoned to the witness stand at once to testify. You've got a nerve, lad. Standing up there, dragging the yard's name through the mud. I didn't mean to. I know the woman very well. There's no better dead room worker out there. How dare you call her a criminal? My learned friend's imagination appears to be wilder than the East End at night. But the recklessness of your accusation aside, there's another grave problem with your argument. One which the prosecution demands you address at once. Oh great, what is this gonna be? A grave problem? Oh my word. Who do you claim acted as the victim's doppelganger? What? Doppelganger is basically like it's like a twin in a way. Certainly. If the birdcage containing the body of the victim was exchanged for another, that cage must have also contained a body. And yet, no missing persons or accidental deaths of anyone even remotely resembling the victim have been reported. Which means there was no one dead or alive who could have fulfilled the role of a body double for Mr. Asman. Ah, that's true. If my argument is that there were 2 bird cages, then there must have also been 1 person inside each. But I don't know if I've got an answer to this yet, have I? I think it's a wax figure. What can I do to reveal how this body double stunt was achieved? It's the waxwork. Present evidence. That's why he returned the waxwork to the museum. But why did he keep the head? Because I don't think he wanted the police to see the identity of the professor. Because that waxwork, when it's made, it's also concealing the professor's identity, the serial killer, from 10 years ago. Okay, let's see here. People. Let's see. This is gonna get really hard now. Very well. The defense will address my learned friend's concerns by presenting evidence that reveals the true nature of Mr. Asman's body double. Good gracious, evidence. I do hope this isn't filibustering, counsel. The court is expecting a name. If you think you have relevant evidence, present it now. The body double and the birdcage were hiding inside the balloon that was floating above the stage, which means that any witnesses would only have seen them from 60 feet away. So who was it that appeared out of that explosion, some 18 meters above the spectators? Aha. The body double inside the second birdcage was... Really hope this is right.
Take that!
We know that the victim, Mr. Asman, was in the birdcage that was situated inside the Kinesis machine on stage. And therefore, he couldn't have been inside the second birdcage. Instead, that contained something else. What's been described as a body double, which is what fell from the sky and crashed into the Crystal Tower. Yes, counsel, according to your somewhat elaborate version of events, I hope that I'm right, because usually when you're right, the music stops. And that body double inside the second birdcage was, in fact... It's alright, Mr. Naruhodo. You're ready for this. Just steel yourself, and come out with it. Thank you, Mr. Zato. I needed that. As I was saying, the body double inside the second birdcage was, and unbelievable as it may seem, that thing there. The wax figure. I was right.
Objection!
Open your eyes and look into mine, my Nipponese friend. Now tell me, what are you playing at? Stand firm now, Ryunosuke. This is the time to show your Japanese spirit. As the court will observe, this is a waxwork model. A model, in fact, of an infamous London murderer from 10 years ago, the Professor.
Objection!
You started by indicating the leader of the forensic investigation team as an accomplice in this crime. And now you've moved on to indicating waxworks. Yes, that's about the size of it. But why? And why this waxwork? It looks nothing like the victim. In fact, it could hardly resemble him less. What possible justification can you give? If you want to know why, ask Mr. Drebber. What? Just days before Professor Hairbrains performed his public demonstration, Mr. Drebber abducted this model from Madame Tuspel's. Did you say abducted? And 2 days after the incident at the Great Exhibition, he returned it to the museum without the head. Then the timing. Is this true, Mr. Drebber? At first, I couldn't see why Mr. Drebber would have stolen the waxwork and then given it back again. But now, the reason is clear. He took it so that he could put it inside the second birdcage as a body double for Mr. Asman.
Objection!
Are you hearing this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Are you hearing the defense's astonishing proposal? That the witness fabricated this vast machine with the intention of deceiving some wretched scientist. That he did so in collusion with the country's finest coroner on a public stage in front of a vast audience. This is not looking good right now. The way we're right, what we're saying, we're right on. But the way that Van Zieks is describing it, it's not good right now. He's very convincing. And that, to effect the deception, he used a waxwork model that in no way resembles the victim. Are we really to believe this far-fetched tale? What do you decide?
Objection!
Wait. Yes, if you put it like that, of course it sounds implausible. My lord, I need to speak, if you please. No, please don't tell me you've reached a verdict. Go ahead, Mr. Foreman. Myself and my colleagues have reached an agreement. No. No, no, no. Very good. In that case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will state your leanings for the court to hear now.
Guilty!
No!
Guilty.
Guilty! Guilty!
You idiots!
Guilty.
Kill me!
Oh, this is not good right now. So as indicated by the foreman, the jury has reached a consensus. I knew that was going to happen. We shall get through this, Mr. Naruhodo, as we always do. And uncover some new truths along the way. I'm quite sure. Yes, I agree. I'm going to have to appeal to the jurors as usual and see if I can persuade them to change their minds. The defense will now embark on a summation examination. Are you and your fellows ready to proceed, Mr. Foreman? We are, my lord. This stupid jury, they've been fooled. Very well. In that case, I ask you now to state clearly for all present to hear the grounds on which each of you has decided that the defendant is guilty of the crime which he is charged. The jurors' contentions. I've known that woman for years. She'd never be an accomplice to anything. It's utter nonsense to think that those two would ever be conniving with one another. Oh dear, this is most troubling. But surely the waxwork the man stole is nothing to do with the coroner, is it? I have had my own problems with members of the police. I do not trust them much. I've seen no rigorous proof that this waxwork was ever inside the birdcage. It's conjecture. Accusing someone without right evidences. He's not a proper job, is he? I would have it. Well, you're accusing the professor with no evidence. Somewhat unsurprisingly. It seems the introduction of this waxwork model to the proceedings has polarized opinion. Given that its face is obscured and its build in no way resembles that of the victim, I can only applaud my learned friend's temerity at suggesting it as Mr. Asman's body double. Yes, the applause is deafening, and yes, I know it seems extraordinary, but that's the point. That's why I have a strong feeling it's actually a greater clue than anyone yet realizes. What are you thinking, Mr. Naruhodo? I can't explain why at the moment, but I feel as though there's a specific reason why it was used, why it has to be this model. Yeah, you know why? It's because Asman is the professor. That's what it might be. The serial killer might actually be alive. And what happened was he had switched the doubles. So basically he had switched the bodies. That's what Drebber did. He switched Asman's body for a real body. So Asman is actually alive. That's what I think might happen. Asman was the serial killer from 10 years ago. That's what we might be onto now. Really? A reason why? Nothing else would do, you mean? Yes, and I'm convinced it's something far more significant than whether or not the model looked like the victim. Well, if that's the case, we must prevent the trial from ending prematurely at all costs. Yes, agreed. I have to find a way out of this. If you are ready, counsel, you may proceed with the summation examination. Yes, my lord. The defense's rebuttal. I've known that woman for years. She'd never been accomplished to anything.
Hold it!
Just because you know somebody for years, you know, this isn't really complete proof. The order of things seems to have changed. I mean, it is kind of, you know the person a bit, but you might not know everything about the person. The order of things seems to have changed around here for some reason. I'm a copper, lad. It's a copper's discretion to bend the rules sometimes, when needs must. What's wrong with that? Where do I start? I've been working at the yard for 40-odd years. That's even more than I thought. We've only had a Metropolitan Police Service in town for 70 years, you know. Of course, times have changed. The public didn't trust coppers back when I started. It was rough. We had to fight crime, and we had to fight to win the public's trust as well. And win we did. Forensic science was in its infancy, too. Even more than it is now, and she spearheaded the revolution. Dr. Siff, you mean? That's right. About 10 years ago now it was, when I was still a youngish Bobby on the beat. That's when she started making a name for herself as a top-class coroner. And now look at her, head of the forensic investigation team, and a woman no less. Well, you won't hear me complaining. It's what we all dreamt of back then, I tell you. Could you tell me without holding that gun in the air? We were all out to uphold justice, lad. Full of vim we were, full of vim. That's coming across loud and clear. There's something I'm curious about. Let me look at something. Autopsy report. Courtney Siff, coroner. But what about the serial killer's autopsy? Courtney Stevens. That can't be a coincidence. First name is the exact same, but last name also starts with an S. Courtney Stevens. Courtney Siff for now, Courtney Stevens for back then. That the autopsy for the professor, death by hanging, confirmed at midnight, 17th of June. That can't be a coincidence. It's utter nonsense to think that those two would ever be conniving with one another.
Hold it!
But we're only just starting to understand this case. Maybe you should keep eye contact with us, juror number 1. What are you reading there, sir? The man behind those murders on Solar Pond Street was caught in 2 days flat. That's real policing for you. That's really not relevant to this case, is it? You're wrong there. Because it was Dr. Siff in charge of examining the bodies. And it was evidence arising from her work that led to the arrest of the scoundrel responsible. Oh. That's right. Oh. That woman is at the forefront of this country's fight against crime. The idea that she's somehow involved in this murky business is a load of old tosh. I thought it was up to me to press the jurors, not the other way around. Oh dear, this is most troubling, but surely the waxwork the man stole has nothing to do with the coroner, is it?
Hold it!
Why would you assume that? Well, quite simply because that unsettling swindler has no relationship with the woman, does he? True, as it stands, we don't know of any connection. Oh gosh, but it would be delightfully romantic if they were somehow to have a mutual interest in the waxwork. It's a bit creepy. Romantic. A woman of society such as myself views everything in terms of relationships, you know. Well, you learn something new every day, even if you don't want to. One might wonder about a possible relationship between the defendant and this coroner, woman. Or perhaps between the defendant and the handsome prosecutor just there. This woman may be more astute than I've been giving her credit for. If that's the woman's stance, then perhaps demonstrating some connection between the waxwork and Dr. Siff would be enough. Yes, I agree. As soon as we have even a whiff of a connection, she'll be first to know. I have had my own problems with members of the police. I do not trust them much.
Hold it!
What sort of problems? Let's just say we have run into each other on numerous occasions while I've been performing on the street. Right, I see. Obviously, artists such as myself cannot appear on stage as we work in close proximity to our audiences. So we perform our great magic in parks, on street corners, and the like. But the police use any excuse to make our lives difficult. Oh, what is this?
Excuse me.
Do you have something to say in response to that, Mr. Ottermole? Who are you calling a mass murderer? What? Sorry, my mistake. I got confused because I heard you look like him. Oh, sorry. I don't look anything like the man. You want to be locked up, Sonny? Thanks, Mr. Sholmes. Perhaps we could move on. I was really wondering if you had something you wanted to add in response to what juror number 3 just said. Can you not be doing that with a gun? That's really dangerous what he's doing right now. And clearly you do. Back in my day, back in the good old days, it wasn't like this. What was it like, sir? We worked our fingers to the bone to earn the public's trust, we did. And by the Jove, we earned it. People respected us back then. Respected you? No one would have called a coroner into question in them days. A coroner's report was the hallmark of an investigation done right. Especially when Dr. Courtney Stevens put her name to it. She was the best of the best, and the apple of the forces. Courtney Stevens? Hold on a minute. What are you talking about? Who's Courtney Stevens? Yeah, I want to hear this now. Ah, sorry. Got a bit carried away there. Stevens is Dr. Siff's maiden name. Oh. Her maiden name. So that was before she was married. Of course, yes. Silly me. Yes! I knew there was no coincidence that the first name was Courtney. So that was it. That's how she's hid behind it. When she got married, her last name changed. It's Siff now, isn't it? Stevens. I'm sure I've seen that name somewhere recently. Anyway, the point is, those were the great days of policing, not like now. Sorry to interrupt, sir. But do you think you could change your statement to include that name? Well, yes. I don't see why not. She was Courtney Stevens back then when I knew of her, of course. A legendary coroner even then. Look. Courtney Stevens for the serial killer's autopsy, too. I was starting to think that Asman was the serial killer and that Courtney Stevens faked her autopsy and he was still alive. But why did they kill him? Drebber and Courtney knew that Asman was possibly the serial killer if that theory is true. But why did they turn on him now?
Hold it!
She was legendary, was she? What did you say? Ah, that woman is still the best coroner in the land. Head of the forensic investigation team. Legendary was your description, sir, not mine. Rubbish. That word never passed my lips. I've never described anybody that way, ever. Not if they were still in the game. I think the point you're trying to make is that Dr. Siff is still an extremely talented coroner. Would that be fair? It would. If it weren't for the fact that you're trying to drag that legendary woman's reputation through the mud. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Legendary. Okay, let's press these other two jurors and then we're gonna start pitting. I've seen no righteous proof that this waxwork was ever inside the birdcage. It's conjecture.
Hold it!
But you claimed the whole instantaneous kinesis demonstration was a trick. That I did, but there's more than one way to pull a rabbit out of a hat, isn't there? Sorry? I grant you, given that this cage appeared from amidst an explosion, there'd have been no need to use a real person. But if a waxwork had been used, the culprit could at least have the decency to make it look like the victim. I'm not sure exactly how much criminals are governed by decency. The point is, if you're gonna make a claim about that waxwork being inside the birdcage, you need to give us some evidence. Without that, it's just not science. I suppose we should expect nothing less than a logical argument from a fellow of the Royal Society. But that perhaps means his mind could be changed when he managed to present suitable evidence. Evidence that the Professor Waxwork was inside that birdcage. Can I produce that or not? Evidence that the waxwork was inside the birdcage. Is there anything that we have? I'm gonna back off for the moment. I'm gonna come back to this. Well, I can't state quite categorically, sir, we have no such evidence at this present time. That much was abundantly clear before that brassy proclamation, I assure you. And why you can count on the fact that I shan't be changing my leaning. Oh dear, that proclamation was even brazier than yours, Mr. Naruhodo. If only we had some evidence, things might be different, though. Accusing someone without right evidences, he's not a proper job, is he? I won't have it.
Hold it!
I've got to ask, why have you brought that corn into court with you? Colonel Cobb, he's been growing back on the farm. I'm off on me way into town. He's a proper nibbler, he is. Yes, the nibbling seems to be taking quite a while. Maybe it could wait until after the trial. Oh, I don't like the sound of that. You need colonels at times like these. Whatever, I've some mad, big to decide. The colonels always point me in the right direction, see? You're talking about your cob of corn? Nibble, nibble, guilty, bobble. Nibble, not guilty, out. Nibble, nibble, guilty, bobble. Nibble, not guilty, out. Nibble, nobble, guilty, bobble. Nibble, not guilty, out. Okay. Nibble, nobble, guilty, bobble. Nibble, not guilty, out. Perhaps it's akin to fortune-telling with flower petals like people do back home. Professor Hairbrain's fate is to be decided by a cob of corn. Could you not at least wait until we've had more time to find the truth before deciding on the defendant's guilt? Oh, I don't know about that. Tom's awfully full already. Amazing. I know it seems a little far-fetched to think that the waxwork model of the professor was in the birdcage, but on the other hand, it explains a lot. If there really is a reason why that particular waxwork had to be used to Mr. Asman's double, we must do everything we can to make the jurors understand it. The truth is, I'm sure that that's the key to this, but it's the most puzzling part of it too. In that case, you should see what additional information you can glean whilst trying to change the jurors' minds. If you can read a book whilst earning a rice cracker, Mr. Naruhodo, I'm sure you could do this. Right, yes. Okay, hit him? She was Courtney Stevens. But surely the waxwork the man stole has nothing to do with the coroner, is it? I'm gonna pit them both against each other, hopefully this works.
Objection!
These two statements clearly contradict each other. Good gracious. Those two whose statements do you refer to, counsel? So, juror number 2. Oh gosh, me? What can I do for you? I presume that you heard what juror number 6 said in his statement. It's brought to light that the maiden name of the coroner, Dr. Siff, which in turn has revealed a connection that wasn't apparent before. Well, naturally, as a woman of society, I find such connections and relationships irresistible. But oh golly, I'm afraid I fail to see what you mean. Dr. Siff's maiden name is Stevens, and through that name, the coroner is very definitely linked to the waxwork of the killer. The defense has evidence to prove it. My goodness, evidence, you say? How utterly enthralling. Counsel, the court cannot overlook that last remark. I very much hope that there is substance to your claim. Of course, my lord. I would ask the court to look at this. The evidence that clearly links Dr. Siff to the mass murderer known as Professor. The autopsy. Courtney Stevens.
Take that!
I have here a certain autopsy report from 10 years ago. A 10-year-old autopsy report. What relevance does that have? It is, of course, from the autopsy of the person portrayed in the waxwork, the killer known as the Professor. Remember, the Professor killed Barrick's brother, so this is very personal for him. The Professor's, but the man was a capital offender, so... That's right. This is the certification of death that was drawn up after the convict's execution. The identity of the killer was never made public, so the report gives a few details. But what's important is the name of the coroner who wrote it. Courtney Stevens. Oh my, Courtney Stevens. Strike a light. It appears that the professor's autopsy was conducted by Dr. Siff 10 years ago, and a few days ago, Mr. Drebber very deliberately stole the waxwork of the professor from Madame Tuspel's. A waxwork that doesn't, in fact, resemble the victim, Mr. Asman, at all. And do you suppose there's some unsavory relationship between those events? Absolutely, I'm sure of it. There's no doubt in my mind that the professor case is at the heart of a link that we have yet to uncover. Between Dr. Courtney Siff and Mr. Enoch Drebber. So there's something going on here. Hidden links, mysterious connections, secret relationships. This is all most extraordinary. We're surely obliged now to explore this further. Can we change one juror's mind? Quite right. We can't let this trial come to an end now. Not while there's the cloud of suspicion hanging over the yard's best coroner. It wasn't like this in my day, but we're still here to uphold justice in the end. Okay, well, at least a cop has sense to him. We need to change 2 more jurors' minds. Now this part's gonna be really hard. How do I prove that the waxwork was inside, that it was inside the birdcage? There's gotta be a way to prove that. There's gotta be something. Oh, this! The piece of broken glass. How could I forget about this? Oh, this. This is the proof that we need here.
Hold it!
The glass. It was found in the pocket, right. It was found in the pocket of the waxwork. That's the proof. I forgot about that. Okay. Okay, let's skip to this here. I have evidence. Actually, I have something I'd like you to see, sir. Oh? I must warn you that I firmly believe it's only wise to trust men in white coats. So given your jet black outfit, I don't mind admitting to a sense of trepidation here. So you don't trust anyone in black. Looking in the mirror must be very trying. I do have evidence that proves that the waxwork was inside the birdcage, namely... piece of broken glass.
Take that!
What's that? A piece of glass? Though it's unusually thick for glass. Yes, it's a piece of broken glass that we found inside the jacket on the waxwork. As you say, it's not ordinary glass though, it's very thick and clearly made for extra strength. Much like the special glass that was developed for the construction of the Crystal Tower. The Crystal Tower. Holy smoke. Exactly, the centerpiece of the Great Exhibition, where the very incident we're talking about took place. On the day in question, the birdcage fell from above and smashed through a window of that special glass. From whence this small piece originated. Is that it? Precisely. So, what do you say? Now that clear evidence in support of the assertion has been placed before you. Well, as I said, I only trust men in white coats as a rule. However, when the reasoning is sound, it's fair to say color shouldn't come into it. In light of what you've shown me here, yes, I feel obliged to change my position on the matter. In that case, juror number 4, you will amend your statement now, please. The presence of that piece of glass leaves me in little doubt that the waxwork was inside the birdcage.
Hold it!
Thank you for reconsidering your position, sir. Your words are misplaced, boy. My opinion is governed by logic and science, and nothing else. Yes, science is where you should direct your words of gratitude. Ah. What's the matter with you? Too good to say some words of thanks to the mother of all academic subjects? What is it about scientists, honestly? Okay, let's look at all of the... Okay, we're gonna have to try to pit more jurors against each other now.
Hold it!
Okay, skip this. I'm just curious what they're gonna say here. Okay, skip this here. Oh, she really likes eating that corn. But he's refusing to change his stance. Let's see if I can pit them against each other.
Objection!
No, it's not working here. Ah. Ah. Ah, okay. I gotta save again here. I only got one chance left.
Objection!
Those two statements clearly contradict each other. Okay, so I had to pit him against her. Good gracious. Two statements to your fur counsel. If you could put down your corn for a moment, juror number 5. Yeah, I might want to put that down. Oh, you mean me? You've pointed out that it's wrong to make an accusation without evidence. But the accusation that the waxwork model was inside the second birdcage on the day in question is not without supporting evidence, as the defense demonstrated to the juror sitting beside you. Oh, is that right? Would it be fair to say you didn't follow the argument? I don't understand much besides Colonel Cobb, to be honest. Of course you don't. If I could interject here. Please do, sir. Now that this assertion of yours about the waxwork has been backed up by some solid evidence, it would be wrong of me as a man of science not to pursue the matter further. Well, me too then. Sorry? If this brainy gentleman says he's right, then he must be. See? I wouldn't dream of going against Colonel Cobb or anyone who's got stuff in between the ears. Okay, that's it. We got 4 jurors. Success. If you can call it that. Thank you, counsel. That will do. As a result of the summation examination, the jury's overall leaning has changed. 2 jurors now call guilty, against 4 who call not guilty. Accordingly, the court has failed to reach a consensus at this time. And the trial must continue. We did it. Oh, well done, Mr. Naruhodo. Another wonderful victory. A waxwork of the despicable professor, used as a body double for the victim in this quite extraordinary case. I must say, it's extremely hard to believe the assertion could possibly be true. However, it would appear that it does at least warrant further investigation. It's the waxwork of the professor that links Mr. Drebber and Dr. Siff. And I'm convinced that there's a special significance to that link. I don't know what you're hoping to prove, lad. I really don't. The truth, sir, by using evidence and testimony. If the court is to delve deeper into the alleged involvement of the waxwork in this case, then the prosecution calls for the owner of the model to be summoned as a witness. The owner, Madame Tuspels. Madame Tuspels. I really thought that Lord Van Zeeks would object to this whole line of inquiry. Very well, I concur. Make arrangements for Madame Tuspels to appear as a witness, with immediate effect. Bring in also Courtney as a witness. I want to hear her testimony. Listen carefully, my learned friend. Oh, yes? You should know that you're on the brink of opening Pandora's box. Yeah, Pandora's box is the ancient story of like, I'm trying to remember, was it a Greek story? Was it? It was a Greek story, I think it was, where one of the gods gave Pandora a box and told her that she has to hold on to it. Well, told her that whatever you do not open the box. And eventually curiosity got the best of her and she opened the box and it let out like all the evil things in the world, diseases, you know, sins, all the really bad things came out of it. The court shall now adjourn for 45 minutes. During that time, the prosecution will summon the new witness and prepare her for taking the stand. Madame Tuspels, yes. I shall see to it at once, my lord. To be continued. So this trial isn't over yet, but we're getting somewhere. We're on the right track. I feel like there's a giant conspiracy going on here at this point. So thank you guys for watching. I'll have the next part up for you guys as soon as I can. Thank you again, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone.